Okay, welcome everybody. We are on to our Unit 6 development. This is where we have our little flower babies. All right, so we're going to start with the first section of development, and that is going to be our intro to development. So you're going to write that right at the top, and we're going to dive right in. So, first little subtopic I want you to write is going to be exploring human development. And what exactly is that? So, first of all, what is development? And so, development is the pattern of continuity and change in human capabilities. Okay, it's kind of like the study of finding the patterns of how things that stay the same, that's the continuity, and then the changes that also occur as humans. Okay, and then under this, continue with our bullets. And this is going to be that we are going to focus on growth and decline. So that's exactly what developmental psychologists do. If this is something of interest to you, this is definitely a field in psychology that you could get into as well. And in developmental psychology, they're always looking to see how people change both physically and psychologically as they age. Okay, so those are the things that we're writing down. Now we're moving on to the next one, which is the different levels of development. Now, a little side note, just because I have, let's say, one or two bullets on the paper does not mean that that's the only thing that you are going to be writing. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go. It's just a little guide as you guys are writing. So first, next subtopic is going to be the levels of development. So these are basically the different types of things that in developmental psychology they look at. So first one is going to be the physical slash biological concepts, okay? And this is next little bullet for physical is going to be they're going to look at the changes in a person's biological nature, right? So they're looking at nature. Next little bullet, they're going to look at genes, puberty, menopause, major life changes that happen physically, right? That then the body kind of shifts to prepare for kind of like the next stage of life. Another thing that they look at is the word maturation. You're going to see this a lot. And this is basically changes throughout life that happened based on like your brain, height, weight, and motor skills. Make sure to write that down. So these are kind of like the changes that happen, the maturing of these different components. We'll go a little bit more into the details of what is maturation. All right, but not right now. So next one is going to be cognitive. And then this is what they look at, the cognitive process. And so cognitive process is basically the changes that happen in people's thoughts, intelligence, and language. Okay, they also look at memory and like problem solving. So everything we kind of learns in cognition unit, it's kind of the same thing here, but it's how does it progress as we age, right? From beginning to end. And then the next one is going to be the social emotional. And this is the changes that happens in people's relationship with others as well as our emotions and personality. Okay? So those are the three different components that developmental psychologists look at. Then we're going to go into research methods in development. They kind of use two different methods within it, and these are something that you should have remembered from our research section. And the first one is going to be cross-sectional. Okay, cross-sectional studies is this is when they get a group of people of different ages, okay, all at the same time, okay? And then they're going to basically study the differences at that particular time based on the different people, okay? And we talked about this before. So what they'll do, they usually do this because it's cheaper, it's faster, right? We get the results immediately since we're testing it at this particular time. The problem with this is that there are a lot of variables in a person's life that we don't get to really know in cross sectional. and those variables can affect, right, the things that we're assessing. So for instance, if they want to do a cross-sectional study on intelligence, okay, and see how humans develop their intelligence, they will basically get people of different ages right now, like 2024, and then they will measure, right, their intelligence, see their differences, and compare. Okay, again, problem with that, there's too many variables that we don't know that could have affected the person's intelligence, right? Then we have the next one, which is longitudinal studies. And this is a long study with the same group of people. Okay. So they typically find them during a particular moment, and then they'll follow that same group of people as they grow up, or whatever stage they want to look at. Maybe they just want to study adolescence, right? So they'll only study they'll get a group of people starting adolescence and they'll follow them for 5, 10 years. Okay. Some may study longitudinal studies could last years. Okay. Again, longitudinal studies are exceptionally great studies because it's really, really in depth. We get to see the different variables that do affect people's development and that affect the way that they are, um, how they grow. The problem with this is it costs a lot of money and it takes a really long time to get the results. Okay. Another drawback can be that the people can get out of the study. So then you lose all of your research from them. So there is some drawbacks from both, but they're also both very, very insightful. Okay. Then we're going to go to what are some issues in developmental psychology, because of course there's a lot of controversy when it comes to this topic and the different perspectives, because the reality is, like we've talked about it many, many times, humans are complicated. There's no one size fits all. And so it's always good to kind of look at the different perspectives as well as what are some issues and kind of how do we keep that into account when we're talking about the development of human beings. And the first type of issue is the one that's always coming up in psychology, which is the nature versus nurture. So you're going to want to title this Issues with Developmental Psychology. Then we're going to have our first one, which is nature versus nurture. Okay. And then make sure to write this down because it tends to be one that a lot of people get confused. And nature is basically our biological, right? Our biological aspects of being human. So this could be genetics, our chemicals, um, forming in the womb. So those are all nature, right? And then um, how does nature affect the way that we develop? And then, of course, the other one is the nurture, and this is our environment, right? Once we're born, how does the environment, how do our experiences, okay, affect our development, right? Maybe we are, let's say, the nature of it is we have a genetic disorder, right? Or we have, I don't know, just the genetics of it, component of it. And then how does our environment either feed into that or make it better? So let's say you have a child that is born with like a developmental, like not Asperger's, I'm sorry, autism, right? And that's a genetic. They know that it's nature. Now, how does then nurture ensure that developmentally that child can be, grow into a well-rounded individual? And many times some environments, right, or nurture are more supportive of it, right? Going to therapy, getting as much support as possible, while other environments, the nurture is maybe they don't have the resources to do that or the education to know, like, hey, my child may need these types of services or therapies. Okay, so just kind of like that debate, which one is the most impactful for development. Then the next one is going to be continuity and discontinuous, which are kind of like stages. So continuity is based on this idea that we kind of grow in like slow processes, right? It's like this, and this is the best way. I'm going to show you a little image. Continuous is like, it kind of like just goes together. It's not separated. Um, and so, but discontinuous is that it's in stages. It's based on like actual ages, right? And so, like, you have to master this one stage in order to move to another. There's also that debate of like, by this age, you need to have this, then you go to the next one, okay? So it's kind of like that debate of, is this just a continuous kind of growing on each other development, or is it discontinuous that you go by stages and this ages? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more in class and have this little nice little discussion there. And and then the last one is stability and change, right? Are there traits that persist throughout our life, or are we just constantly changing as we age? Okay, so there is this concept of, and we'll talk a little bit more of what's called temperament. And what they say is temperament is something which is, and write this down, which is an emotional reactivity and intensity. Okay. So what they say is this is something that is stable throughout your life. You are born with this. Okay. And then as you get older, your personality, so as you're getting older, this temperament can affect your personality, but it could also affect, and we'll talk about that as we go, how can temperament also affect your the way that people react to you, how your environment reacts to you as well. So it's quite interesting how that can be. But there is a lot of research. What they're saying is that your personality does change, but it stabilizes as you get older. Okay. And the reality is, what they're saying is, as a young child, we cannot predict the person's traits. Okay. So please make sure that you're writing all these little bullets down as I'm talking. Especially like social attitudes, those change. Okay. Specific traits that we have early on doesn't always mean that it continues as we get older, right? As we experience life and people influence us, and our perception of experiences, it does alter certain traits that we may have. Okay. Um, so those are pretty much it. That's the intro to development, and we'll go on to the next one, which is going to be prenatal and prenatal development.